Blood is thicker than water, but money freezes them both solid. When Anna's father died, she didn't just lose a parent, she lost her only anchor. Then her stepmother looked her in the eye, handed her a cheap cardboard box, and took her livelihood, too. "You're fired." 2 words that were supposed to be the end of her story. But the quiet guy in the corner booth, the one with scars hidden under expensive wool, had other plans. The brass bell above the door of Harding's bakery didn't chime. It choked. The clapper had been sticking for 3 weeks, right around the time Anna's father was put into the ground. Anna meant to fix it. She meant to do a lot of things. But grief was a heavy, suffocating blanket that made just tying her apron strings feel like moving underwater. She was scrubbing the steam wand on the espresso machine when the scent of expensive, sterile gardenias cut through the comforting aroma of roasted beans and yeast. Beatrice. Anna didn't look up. She kept her focus on the caked-on milk, scraping at it with a thumbnail. "You're using the wrong rag," Beatrice said. Her voice was like ice clinking in a highball glass. Crisp, expensive, utterly devoid of warmth. Anna finally turned. Her stepmother stood on the other side of the pastry case, looking like she belonged in a boardroom, not a flour-dusted bakery in the South End. She wore a tailored beige trench coat that cost more than the commercial oven humming behind Anna. 2 men flanked her. Suits, leather briefcases, dead eyes. Lawyers. "It's the rag Dad always used," Anna said, her voice flat. She tossed the damp cloth onto the counter. "What are you doing here, Beatrice? It's past closing. I'm locking up." Beatrice ran a manicured finger over the glass of the display case, checking for smudges. Finding none, she sighed, as if disappointed she couldn't criticize the cleaning. "No, Anna, you're not locking up. Not tonight. Not ever again." The hum of the refrigerator suddenly seemed deafening. Anna wiped her hands on her apron. The cotton felt rough against her damp skin. "What are you talking about?" "I'm selling the building," Beatrice said. She didn't blink. She didn't look away. She delivered the news with the casual indifference of someone ordering a latte. Suncorp developers made an offer yesterday. I signed the paperwork this afternoon. They're gutting it on Monday. Anna's chest tightened. A dull, metallic ache bloomed behind her ribs. "You can't. Dad left the business to both of us. We have 50-50 equity." One of the suits stepped forward, opening his briefcase. He pulled out a crisp manila folder and slid it across the counter, right over a stray dusting of powdered sugar. "Actually, Ms. Harding, your father's will stipulated that the business shares were to be held in a trust managed by his wife until you reached 25. You are 24. I turn 25 in 3 months. Anna whispered, the blood draining from her face. "Which means—" Beatrice interrupted, stepping closer to the glass. "I am the sole managing director of Harding's, and I say it's bleeding money. The margins are pathetic. The equipment is ancient. I'm liquidating. This is his legacy. This was his life." Anna's voice cracked. She hated herself for it. She hated the way her hands started to shake. "His life is over," Beatrice said. There was no malice in her tone, which somehow made it worse. It was just a transaction. "And your employment here is terminated, effective immediately." Anna stared at the woman who had shared her father's bed, who had sat beside him in the hospice, checking her phone while he gasped for his last breaths. "You're firing me, from my own family's bakery." "I'm unburdening you," Beatrice corrected, smoothing the lapel of her coat. "There's a cardboard box in the back office. You have 15 minutes to gather your personal effects. Leave the keys on the counter. The upstairs apartment is part of the property, so you'll need to vacate that by tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow?" Panic finally breached the wall of Anna's anger. "I live there. My entire life is up there. Then I suggest you start packing, Beatrice said. She checked a slim gold watch on her wrist. 14 minutes. Anna didn't argue. There was no point. You couldn't negotiate with a spreadsheet, and that was all Beatrice was, a cold calculation of profit and loss. Anna turned her back on the woman, untying her apron with stiff, uncooperative fingers. She let it drop to the floor. She walked into the tiny back office. The walls were plastered with faded health inspection certificates and Polaroids of her dad, smiling, covered in flour. She found an empty produce box and started throwing things in. A coffee mug, a battered paperback, a framed photo of her and her dad on her high school graduation. Her throat burned. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not in front of them. She walked back out to the front, the cardboard box heavy in her arms. Beatrice and the lawyers were already by the door, but they weren't alone. Sitting in the corner booth, partially obscured by the shadows of the unlit dining area, was a man. Anna hadn't noticed him come in. He must have slipped through the door when Beatrice arrived. He wore a dark, heavy wool overcoat, completely still, a half-empty cup of black coffee on the table in front of him. He wasn't looking at Beatrice. He was looking at Anna. His eyes were dark, taking in the box, the defeated slump of her shoulders, the arrogant tilt of Beatrice's chin. "We're closed," Anna said to him, her voice hollow. The man didn't move. He simply nodded, once, a slow, deliberate tilt of his head. He dropped a $50 bill on the table, stood up, and walked out into the gathering rain without a word. Anna dropped her keys on the counter. They landed with a sharp, final clatter. She pushed past Beatrice, stepping out into the cold night, leaving her father's ghost behind. The rain wasn't the dramatic, pouring kind. It was a miserable, freezing drizzle that felt like needles against Anna's cheeks. Boston in November was unforgiving. It didn't care if your heart was broken or your bank account was empty. She stood on the corner of 4th and Elm, the cardboard box getting softer, the bottom threatening to give out. The streetlights flickered, casting long, jaundiced reflections on the wet asphalt. She had $32 in her checking account. Her dad's medical bills had eaten everything else. She had nowhere to go, no one to call. Her friends had slowly drifted away during the months she spent practically living at the hospital. A bus roared past, spraying a fine mist of dirty street water against her jeans. Anna squeezed her eyes shut. She finally let out a breath, and it turned into a ragged, pathetic sob. "You're going to ruin the picture." The voice was low, rough around the edges, like tires on gravel. Anna snapped her eyes open. A large, black umbrella materialized above her, blocking out the halos of the streetlights. The man from the corner booth stood beside her. Up close, he was taller than she realized. Broad shoulders filled out the dark overcoat. He had sharp, architectural features, a strong jaw lined with dark stubble, and a faint, pale scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He didn't look like a guy who drank drip coffee in a South End bakery. He looked like the kind of man who owned the block. He was looking down at the box in her hands, specifically at the framed photograph of her and her dad, currently getting misted by the damp air. "Who are you?" Anna asked, taking a half-step back. Her defensive instincts kicked in, though truthfully she had nothing left to steal. "A regular," he said. He didn't smile. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a silver lighter, and sparked a cigarette, shielding the flame with a gloved hand. The smell of tobacco and sharp cedar cologne cut through the wet dog scent of the city. "I've never seen you before tonight," Anna said, her grip tightening on the soggy cardboard. "I come in early, before you start your shift. Your old man used to open up." He took a drag, the cherry of the cigarette glowing red. He made a decent cannoli. The mention of her dad sent a fresh wave of grief crashing over her. She swallowed hard, looking away. "Well, no more cannolis. Beatrice sold the place. It's over. I heard, he said. Suncorp Developers. Anna looked back at him, frowning. How do you know the name? He ignored the question. He looked past her, toward the darkened windows of the bakery. Suncorp is a shell company. They don't build anything. They buy distressed properties, hold the deeds, and wait for the neighborhood to rezone. It's a land grab. I don't care what they do with it. Anna lied. Her voice shook. It's gone, I'm gone. You're standing on the corner in the freezing rain with a box of garbage and a wet photograph. The man observed, his tone brutally clinical. No pity, no forced sympathy, just stating the facts. Where are you going? That's none of your business. You have no money. He continued, as if she hadn't spoken. The medical debt wiped out the family accounts 6 months ago. Your stepmother made sure her name was taken off the joint liabilities before he went into hospice. She let you drown while she secured the life raft. Anna froze. The cold seeping into her boots suddenly felt entirely different. A spike of pure adrenaline shot through her veins. Who the hell are you? He took one last drag of his cigarette and flicked it onto the wet pavement, crushing it beneath the heel of a polished leather shoe. My name is Elias, he said. He looked down at her, his dark eyes unreadable. And I owe your father a debt. I intend to pay it. He didn't wait for her to respond. He simply turned and started walking down the street. He didn't look back to see if she was following. Anna stood there for exactly 3 seconds. The rain was getting heavier. The bottom of the box gave a dangerous, wet tear. She looked at the bakery, dark and locked, and then at the broad back of the stranger in the heavy coat. She hated the cold. She hated Beatrice. And she really hated not knowing what was going on. She clutched the box to her chest and followed him. At the end of the block, a sleek, black Lincoln town car was idling by the curb. The tinted windows were impenetrable. As Elias approached, a man the size of a commercial refrigerator stepped out of the driver's side and opened the rear door. The driver didn't look at Anna. He didn't look at anything. Elias slid into the back. Anna hesitated on the curb. Getting into a dark car with a strange man who knew her banking history was universally understood as a terrible idea. It was how true crime podcasts started. Get in, Anna. Elias's voice drifted out from the leather-scented interior. Before your dad's picture dissolves entirely. She gritted her teeth, ducked her head and climbed in. The interior of the car was stiflingly quiet. The heavy doors shut with a solid, vault-like thud, cutting off the sound of the city rain instantly. It smelled like expensive leather, and that same sharp cedar. Elias sat on the opposite side of the spacious back seat, pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid from a crystal decanter built into the center console. He didn't ask if she wanted one. He just handed her a heavy glass tumbler. Drink? He said. Anna took it. Her fingers brushed his bare knuckles. He had taken the gloves off. His skin was warm. She brought the glass to her lips and took a sip. It burned like fire going down, pooling hot in her empty stomach. Scotch. The good stuff. Where are we going? She asked, setting the box carefully on the floorboards between her feet. To talk, Elias replied. He stared out the rain-streaked window as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. They drove in silence for 20 minutes. Anna watched the city blur past, moving away from the gentrified, polished streets of the center down towards the docks. The buildings grew industrial, all brick and chain-link fences. Finally, the car slowed, pulling into a private, underground parking garage beneath a massive, unmarked high-rise. The giant driver opened the door. Elias stepped out. Anna followed, her legs stiff. They took a private elevator that required Elias to scan a keycard and his thumbprint. The doors opened directly into a sprawling penthouse. Anna stopped dead in her tracks. The space was massive, all floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the churning black water of the harbour. The furniture was minimalist, expensive, and completely devoid of personal touches. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a command centre. Elias walked over to a massive oak desk situated near the windows. He dropped his coat on a chair, revealing a tailored black suit underneath. The fit was perfect. It accented the width of his shoulders and the lean, dangerous grace of how he moved. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to a leather chair opposite the desk. Anna walked over slowly. She didn't sit. She stood behind the chair, gripping the back of it like a shield. "You said you owed my father a debt. Start there." Elias leaned against the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in the bright light. Anna felt painfully aware of her damp, messy hair, the flour dusting her old jeans, and the dark circles under her eyes. 12 years ago. Elias started, his voice a low rumble in the cavernous room. "I was 19. I got a knife in my ribs down by the old rail yard. A bad deal. My own fault. I managed to drag myself a few blocks before I collapsed in an alley behind a bakery." Anna's breath hitched. "Harding's," Elias nodded. "Your father found me when he was taking out the morning trash. Most people would have called the cops, or stepped over me. In my line of work, the cops are worse than the knife. I begged him not to call them." "He took you in," Anna murmured, picturing her dad. "Thomas Harding couldn't even walk past a stray dog without feeding it. He dragged me inside, put me on a table in the back room, patched me up with duct tape and gauze from a first aid kit, let me sleep there for 2 days, fed me soup, and never asked me for a name. Never asked what I did." Elias's jaw tightened. "He saved my life, Anna." Anna stared at him. "You're Mafia." It wasn't a question. The car, the driver, the thumbprint scanner, the suit, the quiet, terrifying authority. Elias didn't flinch. "I prefer the term facilitator, but if it makes you comfortable to use cinematic labels, fine. Yes, I run the East Side." Anna let out a short, humorless laugh, rubbing her forehead. "Great. Perfect. I get fired by my evil stepmother, evicted from my home, and now I'm drinking scotch with a mob boss. I am offering you a solution," Elias said. "A solution to what?" "To Beatrice." Elias stood up, walking behind the desk. He tapped a sleek laptop. "Beatrice didn't just sell the building to developers. Suncorp is a front. It belongs to the Volkov Syndicate. Russians. They're trying to establish a foothold in my territory. They want that bakery because it sits directly on top of a blind spot in the city's subterranean transit grid. Perfect for moving things they don't want seen." Anna felt her head spin. "You're talking about tunnels? Under the bakery? Old prohibition routes, forgotten by the city planners, but not by us." Elias explained calmly. "If the Volkovs take that building, I have a war on my hands. I can't let the sale go through." "The paperwork is signed," Anna said bitterly. "She told me herself." "Paperwork can be voided," Elias countered, "especially if it's proven that Beatrice committed fraud to obtain the deed in the first place." Anna looked up, her heart skipping a beat. "Fraud?" Elias picked up a manila folder from his desk. It looked identical to the one the lawyers had earlier. He tossed it onto the glass surface. "Your father didn't leave the business solely in her control. Beatrice forged an addendum to the trust when he was heavily medicated in his final weeks. I have the medical records proving he lacked the cognitive capacity to sign anything. I have the original will. She stole it from you, Anna." Anna stared at the folder. Her hands trembled. She wanted to reach for it, but she felt rooted to the floor. "Why are you showing me this? Why don't you just take it to the police?" "Because I don't use the police." Elias said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. And because if I just destroy Beatrice, the Volkovs will know I interfered. It invites retaliation, but— He leaned forward, planting his hands on the desk. His dark eyes locked onto hers, burning with intense, calculating fire. If the rightful heir to the business suddenly contests the sale, drags it into probate court, and reclaims the property, it's just a messy family dispute. The Russians back off, the territory stays mine, and Beatrice loses everything. Anna swallowed hard. The room felt incredibly small suddenly. You want me to sue her? I want you to crush her. Elias corrected. I will provide the lawyers. I will provide the capital. I will provide a place for you to live and protection from anyone who tries to intimidate you. And in return? Anna asked, her cynical nature flaring up. She knew men like this didn't do favors, not even to repay old debts. In return, when you get the bakery back, you lease the basement to me. Exclusively. Elias straightened up. You run your bakery upstairs, you bake your bread, you live your life. I get my transit route. We never cross paths. It was a deal with the devil. Anna knew it. She looked at the folder. Inside was her birthright, her father's blood, sweat, and tears. And Beatrice, cruel, heartless Beatrice, would be left with nothing. She looked back up at Elias. The faint scar on his brow. The absolute stillness of his posture. He wasn't a good man. But tonight he was the only man standing between her and the abyss. I don't know anything about courts or lawyers. Anna whispered. You don't need to. Elias said softly. You just need to be brave enough to say yes. Anna stared at the manila folder on the glass desk. The overhead lights caught the slight grain of the paper. It was just a thin piece of cardboard, but it held the weight of her entire life. She reached out and flipped it open. There it was, a photocopy of the addendum. The date at the top was from the second week of October, the exact week her father had slipped into a morphine-induced haze, barely able to recognize her, let alone execute complex legal maneuvers. The signature at the bottom was a jerky, erratic scrawl. It looked nothing like Thomas Harding's steady, looping script. Anger, cold and sharp as a scalpel, finally sliced through the thick fog of Anna's grief. She looked up at Elias. He was watching her hands. He saw the tremor in her fingers stop, replaced by a white-knuckled grip on the edge of the folder. If I do this, Anna said, her voice dropping the frantic edge it had carried on the street, Beatrice goes to prison for fraud. If we play it right, yes. Elias said calmly. And the Volkovs, the Russians, they will be angry. They will look for a weakness. Elias walked over to a small wet bar and poured a glass of mineral water, bringing it over and setting it quietly next to her scotch. Which is why you won't be living in a cardboard box, and you won't walk the streets alone. My people will watch you. We file the injunction tomorrow morning. The moment the court receives it, the sale to Suncorp is frozen. The building goes into legal purgatory. Anna took a slow, deep breath. The scent of cedar and expensive whiskey filled her lungs. It smelled like danger. It smelled like survival. Give me the pen, she said. Elias didn't smile, but a shadow of approval flickered in his dark eyes. He produced a heavy, black fountain pen from his breast pocket and laid it on the desk. He slid a second contract toward her. This is our agreement, he said. Standard commercial lease for the subterranean levels of 412 Elm Street. 99 years, rent paid in full in advance to the sum of $500,000. It legally binds us, which gives me standing to provide you with private security as an invested business partner. $500,000. The number buzzed in Anna's head. She didn't read the fine print. She just took the pen. The nib scratched smoothly across the heavy parchment. She signed her name. Anna Harding. It was done. The baker's daughter had just climbed into bed with the underworld. "Donovan!" Elias called out. The heavy mahogany door to the office clicked open instantly. The giant driver stepped in, filling the frame. Up close, his face was a map of old violence, a flattened nose, thick scar tissue over the cheekbones. But his eyes were surprisingly calm, like a sleeping dog that could wake up and snap a femur in half. "Take Miss Harding to the safe house on Beacon," Elias instructed. "Have a tailor there at 8 a.m. She needs clothes for court. Then call Arthur. Tell him the injunction gets filed at 9 sharp. Donovan nodded once. "Yes, boss." Elias turned back to Anna. "Go get some sleep. The war starts tomorrow." The safe house wasn't a gritty basement. It was a sprawling, sterile penthouse apartment overlooking the Boston Common. The refrigerator was stocked with high-end groceries. The bed was massive, outfitted with silk sheets that felt foreign against Anna's exhausted skin. She dropped a sad cardboard box on the kitchen island and stood in the center of the living room, listening to the silence. Donovan was stationed in the hallway outside, a ghost with a gun. She stripped off her flour-dusted jeans and stepped into a shower made of grey slate. The hot water pounded into her shoulders, washing away the smell of yeast and stale rain. For the first time since her father died, she didn't cry. The tears were gone. They had calcified into a hard, heavy stone in her chest. At exactly 8 the next morning, a sharp knock echoed through the apartment. Anna opened the door to find a woman with a tape measure draped around her neck, holding 3 garment bags. By 9:30, Anna was staring at a stranger in the hallway mirror. Gone was the oversized flannel and the messy bun. She wore a tailored charcoal grey suit that fit her like armor. The wool was impossibly soft, the cut ruthlessly modern. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek, severe knot. She looked sharp. She looked expensive. She looked like a woman who didn't get pushed around by anyone. "Miss Harding." Anna turned. A new man had entered the apartment. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, wearing a 3-piece suit and holding a slim leather briefcase. He had the kind of patrician, arrogant face that belonged on a country club brochure. "Arthur Pendleton," he said, offering a dry, brief handshake. "I'm Mr. Elias's corporate counsel." "You're the lawyer," Anna said. "I am the hammer," Arthur corrected pleasantly. "And today, Beatrice is the nail. We've filed the injunction. A judge signed it 10 minutes ago. The sale is officially suspended, pending a full investigation into probate fraud. Shall we go deliver the good news?" Anna grabbed her bag. "Let's go." The Harding bakery was dark. The closed sign hung crookedly in the front window. A large, garish sold banner had been plastered across the brick facade by Suncorp developers. Anna stood on the sidewalk across the street, flanked by Arthur on her left and the towering bulk of Donovan on her right. A sleek, silver Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Beatrice stepped out. She looked triumphant. She wore a bright crimson coat, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement as she walked towards the bakery door, flanked by her 2 dead-eyed lawyers and a third man Anna didn't recognize. The third man was thick-necked, wearing a cheap leather jacket. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like muscle. Russian muscle. Anna realized with a cold thrill of fear. "Now," Arthur murmured. They crossed the street. Beatrice was fumbling with the keys to the front door when she heard the footsteps. She turned, an irritated sigh already forming on her lips, but it died in her throat when she saw Anna. Beatrice's eyes flicked over the charcoal suit, the pristine shoes, the imposing men standing at Anna's shoulders. The absolute transformation threw her off balance. For a split second, the polished mask of the wealthy widow slipped, revealing genuine confusion. "Anna?" Beatrice scoffed, recovering quickly. What is this, a costume party? I told you to vacate the premises. You are trespassing. Actually, Beatrice, she's inspecting her property. Arthur stepped forward smoothly. He popped the latches on his leather briefcase. The click-clack was deafening on the quiet street. He pulled out a thick stack of papers bound in a blue legal cover. He thrust the papers against Beatrice's chest. Reflexively, she caught them before they fell. "What is this?" Beatrice demanded, looking down at the legal header. "That is an emergency injunction signed by Judge Reynolds of the Suffolk County Probate Court," Arthur said, his voice carrying the calm, deadly authority of a seasoned predator. "The sale of this property to Suncorp developers is frozen. Furthermore, you are formally served with a civil suit for probate fraud, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty." Beatrice's face drained of colour. The crimson coat suddenly looked much too bright against her ashen skin. "This is absurd. I have the signed addendum." "You have a clumsy forgery executed while Thomas Harding was heavily dosed with Dilaudid," Arthur countered. "We have the attending physician's sworn affidavit. We have the original will. If you attempt to access the bakery's accounts, or set foot in this building, you will be arrested for violating a court order." The two lawyers behind Beatrice exchanged a panicked, frantic look. They knew a losing hand when they saw one. "You little bitch!" Beatrice hissed, taking a step toward Anna. The elegant veneer vanished completely. Her face contorted into something ugly and feral. "You think you can just hire some cheap ambulance chaser to scare me?" Before Beatrice could close the distance, Donovan moved. He didn't say a word. He just stepped directly into Beatrice's path, crossing his massive arms over his chest. He looked down at her like she was a mildly annoying insect. Beatrice stopped short. The thick-necked Russian in the leather jacket stepped forward, his hand slipping inside his coat. "I wouldn't," a voice said. Everyone froze. Elias stood at the corner of the alleyway, 50 feet down the block. He was leaning casually against the brick wall, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his dark overcoat. He hadn't raised his voice, but the sound carried through the damp morning air with crystal clarity. The Russian muscle looked at Elias. The man's eyes widened. He recognized him. The color drained from the Russian's face faster than it had from Beatrice's. He slowly, carefully pulled his empty hand out of his jacket and took 2 distinct steps backward, distancing himself from Beatrice. Beatrice looked from the retreating Russian to the terrifying giant blocking her path, to the man leaning against the wall, and finally back to Anna. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She didn't know exactly who Anna was involved with, but she understood power. And right now she had none. "This isn't over," Beatrice spat, her voice trembling. She shoved the legal papers at one of her lawyers, turned on her heel, and marched back toward the Mercedes. Anna watched the car speed away, merging aggressively into the city traffic. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her exterior remained flawlessly calm. "First blood," Arthur noted cheerfully, snapping his briefcase shut. "She'll try to fight the injunction, but she'll fail. By the end of the month, the deed will be back in your name, Miss Harding." Arthur gave a polite nod and walked off down the street, leaving Anna alone with Donovan. Elias slowly pushed off the brick wall and walked towards her. His expensive shoes made no sound on the pavement. He stopped a few feet away, looking at the sold banner defacing the brick. "You held your ground," Elias said. "I was terrified," Anna admitted. Her voice felt thin. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving a cold, shaky exhaustion in its wake. "That man with her, the Russian, he was going to pull a gun." He thought about it. Elias corrected. Then he realized he was standing in the east side. The Volkovs are ambitious, but they aren't suicidal. They won't make a move in daylight. Not yet. Anna turned to look at him. Not yet? Elias met her gaze. His dark eyes were uncompromising. He wasn't going to lie to her. He wasn't going to soften the blow. Beatrice is a greedy, stupid woman. Elias said quietly. She'll panic. She took money from the Volkovs under the table to secure this location. Millions, likely. Money she already spent or hid. When the sale falls through, they won't sue her. They will demand their money back. And when she can't pay them... Elias trailed off, leaving the brutal implication hanging in the air. They'll come after her. Anna finished, a chill running down her spine. And they'll come after the building, after me. They will try, Elias said. He reached out, his gloved fingers lightly brushing a piece of lint off the lapel of her charcoal suit. The gesture was surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence they were discussing. But you belong to me now, Anna, on paper and in the streets. No one touches what is mine. The words weren't a romantic declaration. They were a statement of territorial fact. But standing there on the cold sidewalk, looking up at the man who had pulled her out of the wreckage of her life, Anna felt a strange, undeniable heat bloom in her chest. She wasn't just a baker anymore, she was the bait. And Elias was the trap. I need to get inside, Anna said, looking away from his intense gaze, staring at the locked door of her father's shop. I need to clean the espresso machine. Donovan stepped forward. He didn't ask for the keys. He simply produced a pair of heavy industrial bolt cutters from beneath his coat and snapped the brass padlock Beatrice had installed. The metal gave way with a sharp crack that echoed down the quiet street. He pushed the door open. Anna stepped over the threshold. The air inside was dead. It smelled like stale coffee grounds, trapped dust, and the faint, sour tang of milk left in the lines too long. In just a matter of days, the bakery had lost its pulse. It felt like a tomb. She walked past the pastry cases, stripped bare of the blueberry scones and almond croissants she used to arrange every morning at 4. She stopped at the espresso machine. It was a massive, commercial La Marzocco. Her father had bought it used, rebuilt the boiler himself, and polished the chrome until it mirrored the entire shop. Now it was dull, smudged with Beatrice's fingerprints. Anna shrugged out of the charcoal suit jacket, draping it over a stool. She unbuttoned the cuffs of her crisp white shirt and rolled the sleeves past her elbows. Donovan, Elias said from the doorway. Secure the perimeter. Bring the first crew to the back alley. Tell them to load in quietly. Yes, boss. The giant vanished into the shadows. Elias walked inside, shutting the heavy glass door behind him and turning the deadbolt. He didn't take off his overcoat. He simply stood near the cash register, watching her. He looked out of place among the pastel chalkboards and the flour bins. A wolf standing in a kitchen. Anna found a clean rag under the counter. She grabbed a bottle of heavy-duty degreaser and started spraying the chrome. She scrubbed. Hard, the repetitive motion was a lifeline. It was something tangible she could control when the rest of her world was governed by injunctions, syndicates, and men with guns. She leaned her weight into the rag, attacking a stubborn spot of caked-on syrup. Her chest heaved. The stone of grief that had settled behind her ribs began to crack, letting out a sharp, jagged heat. She didn't even clean it, Anna whispered, her voice tight. She fired me and she didn't even flush the lines. The boiler is going to calcify. She rubbed harder, her knuckles turning white. She let it rot, just like she let him rot in that hospital room. A tear slipped free, hot and angry, tracking through the faint dusting of flour still clinging to her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She just kept scrubbing, her breathing growing ragged. A large, warm hand clamped down over hers, stopping the frantic motion of the rag. Anna froze. Elias stood right beside her. She hadn't heard him move. Up close, The cedar scent of him was overpowering. "You're going to scratch the metal," he said quietly. His grip wasn't punishing, but it was immovable. He gently pried the rag from her trembling fingers. He didn't offer a platitude. He didn't tell her it was going to be okay. Men like Elias knew that was usually a lie. Instead, he turned to the machine. He inspected the dials, the steam wand, the pressure gauges. "Show me how to flush it," he said. Anna blinked, thrown off balance. "What?" "The lines," Elias said, glancing at her. "Show me how to flush them. Unless you want me to bring a mechanic in with the crew." Slowly, the knot in Anna's throat loosened. She let out a shaky breath and stepped next to him. "The red valve underneath. Turn it a quarter-inch to the left. It bleeds the pressure." Elias crouched down, his expensive wool coat brushing the linoleum floor, and found the valve. The machine hissed, spitting a jet of foul-smelling, stagnant water into the drip tray. They worked in silence for 20 minutes. Anna directed, Elias executed. It was a bizarre, surreal domesticity, a mob boss bleeding a commercial boiler. When it was done, the chrome gleamed again. Elias stood up, wiping his hands on a paper towel. "Better?" "Yes," Anna said. "Thank you." A heavy, rhythmic thudding started beneath their feet. It felt like the floorboards were vibrating. Anna looked down. "What is that?" "That is the rent," Elias said. He walked to the back of the shop, past the ovens, to the dry storage room. He pushed aside a rolling rack of flour bags. Beneath it was a faded braided rug. Elias kicked the rug away, revealing a heavy iron trap door bolted into the floor. He leaned down, gripped the rusted iron ring, and hauled it open with a grunt of effort. Cool, damp air rushed up from the dark. Anna peered over the edge. A set of concrete stairs descended into a cavernous basement she had never known existed. Her father had always told her the foundation was solid slab. He had lied. Below, industrial halogen work lights had already been strung up. Men in dark clothing were moving silently, carrying heavy wooden crates from a tunnel entrance that disappeared into the pitch blackness towards the harbour. None of them spoke. The only sound was the scrape of boots and the thud of the crates. "Prohibition," Elias said, standing beside her. "Bootleggers dug it out in the 20s. The city mapped the sewers around it in the 50s and never realized it was here. It runs straight to the shipping docks. No cameras, no way stations." "What's in the crates?" Anna asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. She wasn't sure she actually wanted to know. Elias looked down at her. His eyes were flat, devoid of the strange softness from the espresso machine. "Money, passports, things that need to disappear, things that need to appear." He reached out and pushed the iron door shut. The heavy clang severed the connection between the two worlds. "You bake your bread, Anna," he said, stepping back into the light of the kitchen. "Don't look in the basement." 4 days passed. The bakery remained closed to the public, but inside it was alive again. Arthur Pendleton was a machine. He had frozen Beatrice's bank accounts, tied her properties up in litigation, and filed a restraining order that kept her 50 yards from the building at all times. She had vanished from the city, likely hiding in her sister's house in Connecticut, dodging the process servers. But Elias's men hadn't vanished. They were a permanent fixture. Donovan sat in the front booth during the day, reading a newspaper and drinking black coffee. 2 other men, whose names Anna hadn't learned, worked the night shift in the alley. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. The city was dead quiet, buried under a fresh layer of frost. Anna was in the kitchen. She had 3 massive bowls of sourdough proofing on the stainless steel tables. She was wrist-deep in flour, kneading a heavy mound of dough. Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. The rhythm was hypnotic. It was the only time her brain stopped calculating the danger she was in. Up front, the bakery was completely dark. Donovan was sitting in a chair near the front door, invisible from the street. Anna dusted the counter with more flour. She reached for the dough scraper. Crash! The sound of shattering glass ripped through the silence, followed instantly by the hollow, metallic clatter of something heavy hitting the floor near the pastry cases. Anna flinched, dropping the scraper. Before her brain could even register the break-in, a blinding flash of orange light erupted in the front of the shop. The sharp, toxic smell of gasoline flooded the air. "Down!" Donovan roared. Anna threw herself behind the thick metal counter of the prep station. Fire leapt up the front display case, licking greedily at the dry wood of the counters. But Donovan didn't run for the fire extinguisher. He kicked the front door open and charged straight out into the freezing street. Anna heard a shout, a scuffle, then two dull, heavy pops. Suppressed gunfire. Anna covered her ears, squeezing her eyes shut, pressing her forehead against the cold linoleum. The heat from the fire was already rolling into the kitchen. She forced herself to move. She crawled to the sink, grabbed the heavy red fire extinguisher off the wall bracket, pulled the pin, and ran to the front. She squeezed the handle. A thick cloud of white chemical foam blasted over the flames. The fire hissed, choked, and died, leaving behind a smoking, charred ruin of her father's beautiful display case. Anna dropped the extinguisher. Her hands were shaking violently. The front door was hanging off its hinges. The front window was a jagged, gaping hole. The cold night air poured in, mixing with the acrid smoke. Footsteps crunched on the broken glass. Anna scrambled backward, grabbing a heavy cast-iron skillet from the drying rack. She raised it, ready to swing. A figure stepped through the ruined door. "Put it down." It was Elias. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore dark jeans and a black cashmere sweater, a leather shoulder holster visible over his chest. He looked lethal. His eyes scanned the smoking room, taking in the broken glass, the foam, and finally, Anna. He crossed the room in 3 strides. He caught her wrist, easily disarming her, taking the heavy skillet and setting it on the counter. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. His voice was rough, stripped of its usual calm. "No," Anna choked out. She coughed as the smoke caught in her throat. "No, I'm fine. What happened? Where is Donovan?" "Donovan is cleaning up the mess," Elias said coldly. He didn't let go of her wrist. His thumb swept over her pulse point. It was racing like a trapped rabbit's. He reached up with his other hand and gently tilted her chin, inspecting her face for cuts from the glass. It was a Molotov, poorly constructed, amateur work. "The Russians?" "Yes." Elias's jaw tightened. "A warning shot. They know the building is heavily guarded, but they also know the injunction is tied entirely to you. If you get scared and drop the suit, the building goes back to Beatrice, and the sale to Suncorp goes through." Anna looked at the charred wood. The smell of gasoline made her stomach heave. "They wanted to burn my bakery down. They wanted to terrify you," Elias corrected. He dropped his hand from her face, stepping back to survey the damage. "They used the alley access route to bypass the street cameras. Only someone who knew the exact layout of this block could have directed them." Anna felt the blood drain from her face. "Beatrice, she sold them the blueprints." Elias confirmed. "She's desperate. The Volkovs are squeezing her for the money she took, and she's trying to give them the building by forcing you out." Elias turned back to her. The absolute stillness had returned to his posture, but it was a dangerous stillness. The stillness of a predator calculating the kill. "The safe house isn't secure enough anymore," Elias said. "And you can't stay here. The smoke damage alone makes it uninhabitable. They know where you sleep. They know where you work." "Then where do I go?" Anna asked. The exhaustion was suddenly overwhelming. She was so tired of running. Elias pulled a secure burner phone from his pocket and typed a quick message. He looked up at her. "You go with me," Elias said. "To the compound, North Shore. Nobody gets past the gates." Anna stared at him. The penthouse had been a safe house, a neutral zone. The compound was his home. It was the heart of his empire. Going there meant crossing a line she could never uncross. She wouldn't just be a business partner anymore. She would be fully integrated into his world. "I can't just leave," Anna said, looking around at the ruins of her kitchen. "The dough. The shop. The shop is brick and mortar, Anna. I can rebuild a counter. I can't rebuild you." Elias stepped closer, closing the distance between them until she had to tilt her head up to meet his eyes. The heat radiating off him had nothing to do with the recent fire. "Pack a bag," he ordered softly. It wasn't a request. "You belong to me until this is over, and I protect what's mine." The North Shore compound was not a home. It was a concrete and glass bunker carved into the jagged cliffs overlooking the Atlantic. The driveway was a half-mile of winding asphalt flanked by motion sensors and men carrying suppressed rifles. Anna had been there for 6 days. She felt like a ghost haunting an architectural magazine. The walls were stark white, the furniture was imported, uncomfortable, and meticulously arranged. There were no photographs, no books. It was a place designed for a man who didn't plan on leaving a legacy, only a footprint. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she smelled the sharp, chemical reek of gasoline and heard the hollow pop of gunfire. At 3 in the morning on her 7th day, Anna gave up. She walked barefoot out of the guest suite, her oversized grey sweater swallowing her frame, and navigated the silent halls to the main kitchen. It was a chef's dream. 6-burner gas range, double convection ovens, acres of black marble countertops. And it was completely sterile. The refrigerator held bottled water, high-protein meal preps, and vodka. Nothing else. Anna had asked Donovan to make a grocery run 2 days prior. She pulled a massive stainless steel bowl from a lower cabinet. Flour, water, salt, yeast. She didn't need a recipe. Her hands knew the ratios by muscle memory. She drove her knuckles into the shaggy dough, pushing her weight against the cold marble. The repetitive physical labor grounded her. It was the only thing that kept the creeping, icy dread at bay. The heavy oak door at the front of the house clicked open. Anna didn't stop kneading. She heard the low murmur of voices, Donovan and someone else. Then, heavy footsteps approached the kitchen. Elias walked in. He looked like hell. He was wearing a dark suit, but the tie was gone, and the collar of his white shirt was unbuttoned and stained with a dark, rust-colored smear. Blood. His knuckles were bruised, the skin split over the bone. A fresh, jagged cut traced the line of his jaw. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the sight of her. Her hair was tied back in a messy knot, her hands coated in sticky dough, the scent of yeast filling the sterile room. "You're awake," Elias said. His voice was gravelly, scraped raw by the night. "I couldn't sleep," Anna replied. She looked at his hands, then at his neck. The blood wasn't fresh, but there was a lot of it. Her stomach gave a dull, nervous twist. "Are you shot?" "No." Elias walked over to the kitchen island, heavily dropping a thick, leather-bound ledger onto the marble. He leaned his forearms against the counter, exhaling a long, ragged breath. "Just a disagreement over shipping routes. It's handled." Anna wiped her hands on a clean kitchen towel. She walked over to the sink, wet a separate cloth with warm water, and walked around the island to stand in front of him. Elias tracked her movements. His dark eyes were guarded, but beneath the cold exterior there was a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. "Sit," Anna said, gesturing to one of the high metal stools. He hesitated, then pulled the stool out and sat down. He was still taller than her, even seated. Anna reached out with the damp cloth and gently pressed it against the cut on his jaw. Elias hissed, his jaw muscles jumping, but he didn't pull away. "Your father did this," Elias murmured, his eyes fixed on her face. 12 years ago, he used paper towels and rubbing alcohol. It stung like a bitch. "This is just warm water," Anna said quietly. She dabbed at the dried blood on his neck. "What happened tonight, Elias? Don't give me the PR answer. Give me the truth." "The truth," Elias echoed. He closed his eyes for a second. "The Volkov sent a crew to hit one of my warehouses in the seaport. They wanted to burn my inventory, send a message that the east side was no longer secure. They failed." "And the blood?" "I made sure the message they took back to their boss was clearer than the one they brought to me," he said flatly. He opened his eyes. They were obsidian hard. "They won't come near the bakery again, Anna. I broke their supply chain. They are bleeding money, and they are terrified." Anna's hand slowed. She looked at the bruised knuckles. He had beaten men tonight, perhaps killed them. He was exactly the monster the city whispered about. But sitting here, letting her wipe the blood from his face, he was also the only person who had stood between her and total ruin. "And Beatrice?" Anna asked, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. Elias reached over and tapped the leather ledger on the counter. "Beatrice is done. The Volkovs demanded their money back. She didn't have it. She tried to run. Booked a private charter out of Teterboro to Geneva." Panic spiked in Anna's chest. "She got away?" "No." Elias's lips curved into a cold, humorless smile. "I don't let thieves walk away. My men intercepted her on the tarmac. But we didn't bring her here. We handed her and that ledger over to an FBI task force I occasionally cooperate with." Anna stared at him. "You gave her to the feds. The ledger details every offshore account she used to hide your father's money and every bribe she took from the Russian syndicate." Elias explained. "She isn't just looking at civil fraud anymore, Anna. She's looking at 20 years in a federal penitentiary for money laundering and racketeering. Arthur is filing the final motion in probate court tomorrow. The judge will officially void the sale and return the deed to you." The damp cloth slipped from Anna's fingers, landing softly on the counter. It was over. The nightmare was actually over. Beatrice was gone. The bakery was hers. Her knees suddenly felt weak. The adrenaline that had kept her upright for a week evaporated, leaving a hollow, echoing void. She grabbed the edge of the marble island to steady herself. Elias was on his feet instantly. His hands gripped her waist, steadying her. His touch was firm, burning through the thin cotton of her sweater. "Breathe," he commanded softly. Anna looked up at him. The smell of cedar, smoke, and blood wrapped around her. "You did it. You actually did it. We had a deal," Elias said. His thumbs brushed the curve of her waist. He didn't let go. He stood entirely too close, invading her space, but Anna didn't want to step back. "You went to war," she whispered. "You risked your life, your territory, for a basement tunnel." Elias looked down at her. The harsh overhead lighting cast deep shadows over his eyes, emphasizing the pale scar on his brow. For a long moment, the silence in the kitchen stretched, heavy and charged. "I have a dozen tunnels," Elias said, his voice dropping to a low, rough murmur. "I didn't go to war for the concrete, Anna. I went to war for the baker." He didn't kiss her. He didn't pull her into a cinematic embrace. He just stood there, holding her steady, letting the truth of his words settle between them. He was a man of violence, claiming a woman of peace. It was a collision of two impossible worlds, but as Anna looked at the bruised, bloodied face of the Mafia boss who had saved her life, She realized she didn't want to be anywhere else. 2 months later, the brass bell above the door of Harding's bakery chimed. It was a bright, clear sound. Anna had replaced the clapper herself. Spring had finally broken through the bitter Boston winter. Sunlight streamed through the newly installed front window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. The smell of fresh espresso and warm, crusty sourdough filled the shop, effectively erasing the phantom scent of gasoline that had haunted the building for weeks. Anna stood behind the pastry case, wiping down the glass with a clean microfiber rag. She wore a pristine white apron over dark jeans. The dark circles under her eyes were gone. She looked grounded. She looked alive. The door opened again. Arthur Pendleton walked in. He looked exactly the same. 3-piece suit, polished shoes, an air of wealthy arrogance. He carried a slim leather briefcase. "Morning, Arthur," Anna said, reaching for a paper cup. "The usual? Please, black, no sugar," the lawyer replied. He set his briefcase on the counter and popped the brass latches. He pulled out a heavy, cream-colored document sealed with a gold foil stamp. He slid it across the glass. "The final deed," Arthur said, "recorded with the city at 8 o'clock this morning. It is officially, irrevocably, yours." Anna stared at the paper. Anna Harding, sole proprietor. She traced her finger over the raised gold seal. A lump formed in her throat, but it wasn't grief this time. It was victory. And Beatrice. Denied bail. She's sitting in a federal holding facility. Arthur said, taking the coffee cup Anna handed him. Her lawyers are trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutors have her dead to rights on the Volkov money. She won't see the outside of a cell for a very, very long time. Good, Anna said. She didn't feel vindictive. She just felt a profound, settling peace. Thank you, Arthur. Don't thank me. I just draft the paperwork. Arthur took a sip of his coffee, nodded in approval, and snapped his briefcase shut. Good day, Miss Harding. As Arthur walked out, another figure stepped in from the back hallway. Elias. He moved silently, a ghost in a tailored charcoal suit. He didn't use the front door anymore. He came up through the heavy iron trap door in the dry storage room. The tunnels were operational. Dozens of crates moved beneath Anna's feet every night, ferrying God knew what through the dark belly of the city. She never asked. He never told her. They had an arrangement. Elias walked over to the corner booth. His booth. He sat down, leaning back against the leather, his dark eyes fixed on her. Anna didn't ask what he wanted. She walked over to the espresso machine, pulled a double shot, and poured it over hot water. An Americano. She walked out from behind the counter and brought it to his table, setting it down gently. She didn't walk away. She slid into the booth opposite him. Elias picked up the cup. The Volkovs formally surrendered their claim to the South End this morning. They retreated to Queens. The territory is quiet. For now, Anna said, a cynical edge to her voice. She knew enough about his world to know peace was always temporary. For now, Elias agreed. He took a sip of the coffee. The renovations look good. The new display case is better than the old one. It's paid for, Anna said. She looked him in the eye. I owe you nothing but the basement, Elias. The debt is settled. It was a test, a boundary line drawn in the sand. Elias set the cup down. He didn't look angry. He reached across the table, his large, scarred hand covering hers where it rested on the laminated wood. His skin was warm. The touch sent a familiar, heavy jolt straight to her chest. The business debt is settled, Elias said softly, his thumb tracing the blue vein on the back of her hand. But I'm still sitting in your booth, Anna, and I don't plan on leaving. Anna looked at their joined hands, the flour-dusted baker and the blood-stained boss. It made no sense on paper. But as she looked up into Elias's dark, unwavering eyes, she knew it was the most real thing in her life. She didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she turned her palm up, interlacing her fingers with his. "Good," Anna said, a slow, genuine smile finally breaking across her face. "Because I only make this coffee for regulars. Anna didn't just survive the cutthroat world of betrayal. She baked an empire over the ashes of her enemies. Sometimes the darkest shadows provide the safest cover. If you loved watching Anna reclaim her legacy and the slow-burn tension with Elias, smash that like button right now. Make sure you share this video with your fellow Mafia romance addicts and hit subscribe so you never miss a gritty, grounded story. We want to hear from you. Would you have signed the Mafia boss's contract? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next one.